Good evening, and actually the overnight. And thank you for joining us here on From Day One. The last section of Ghost to Ghost AM comes to us now as we rock through the Dominion in the overnight.
First time caller line, you're on the air. Good morning.
Hello, Art. This is Sean in Grosse-Ile, Michigan.
Hi, Sean.
My story goes back to 1965 or 6 when I was a 5-year-old kid in Chicago down on the south side in Hyde Park.
Yes.
We moved into a house that was an old wood frame house, and they're very rare in Chicago because in the Chicago fire, almost all of them burned down back in the 1800s. So as we moved into this house, as a kid and with my parents, we'd explore, and up in the attic there was some charring where there had been a fire in the attic, and there was an old, maybe maid's quarters up there in this area, which was interesting. But as my parents explored around the attic, they found boxes of old glass negatives. Are you familiar with those?
I am. Yes, I remember them.
And the funny thing that I didn't find out till later was they only showed we kids some of these negatives because some of them were actually very pornographic. But we only knew that there were these old pictures of old days back in Chicago up there. Well, as time went by, the attic was accessible through one of those drop-down stairways, and
yes.
continuously we'd hear little sounds and the lights would be on up there. Well, we went through a project for about a half a year restoring the banister going upstairs. It was an old mahogany banister, so the whole family would be there. That was our entertainment for a long time. And we kept hearing sounds and thumps and footsteps and a sound almost like a bag of potatoes rolling out upstairs. And my dad finally one night grabbed a meat cleaver because he was sure this time it was so loud that there was somebody up there. So he grabbed a meat cleaver from the kitchen, and our most loyal, brave dog in the world was with us, Gretchen, and she would not go with him. The hackles went straight up on her back, and she would not go. So he actually grabbed her by the collar because he thought he was going to have a confrontation. He went upstairs, pulled down the stairs to the attic. The light was on again, and he went upstairs, had to drag the dog with him, whimpering and crying and everything else, only to find nothing again. And what was really strange was we continued to hear these sounds, and it was just part of our lives for about 4 more months until we were ready to move from the house. And my dad packed these pictures up and got rid of them, shipped them out, and it all went away.
It was in the pictures.
Oh, it was in the pictures. Yeah, we're almost positive that what happened was this fire that had happened up there probably took this maid's life, and they were her pictures, and no one knew about it, but she was, I'm sure, worried about being found all the time.
I understand.
When they finally went away, that was the end of it. She was able to go off into peace.
Well, the implication of that is that if there is something that strong in life that we're afraid of being found out, we can't be released in death. And, I've heard this again and again and again and again, and I would like to think, like an earlier caller, that the other side has no time and you're in two places at once, but you've got to imagine the other possibility, and that is that you really are trapped like that nurse.
Absolutely. As a 5-year-old, it was so real, and you're not really tuned into supernatural or fear in the same way, and it was such a real part of growing up. It was amazing.
A real part of growing up. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And take care. Imagine if you knew there were pornographic pictures of you, and you had them, stored somewhere the way this lady apparently did, but you died. And you knew you were going to be found out. You knew that eventually they would be found. Would such a thing keep you on Earth? Wildcard line, you're on the air. Hi.
How you doing, Art?
Okay.
About the mid to early 90s, I was logging up here in north California.
Oh, you mean back in the days when you could actually log in California?
Yeah, we used to be able to do that. But anyway, it was a burn, lightning strike, hit it and burned up quite a few thousand acres. But anyway, in amongst this burn was an Indian burial ground or maybe a medicine area. Okay, we finally moved into that area, and I was waiting for the trucks to gather up. We had all our machinery there, and it was a circle of oak trees. Anyway, one truck come dragging in. He said, "Oh, this is the place. I'm gonna get my shovel out and go scratch around and look for artifacts." I'm half Native American. I said, "This is not a thing to do." Well, anyway, it took me quite a while to consider,
Meaning you were saying don't be logging here.
Don't be scratching around with your shovel looking for artifacts.
Much less logging.
Right. So anyway, we finally got set up. First of all, we're talking brand new equipment. The skidder didn't start. Batteries are dead. Second of all, finally got the skidder started. Then my machine wouldn't start. Well, anyway, after half a day getting everything going, we finally got going. Okay, the guy with the shovel, we got him loaded up. He got out of the woods. The next truck, we got him loaded. His truck caught on fire.
Caught on fire?
Yes. And the third truck, the 40-foot trailers, vans.
Oh, I've seen them.
Yeah, okay. The third truck, he's halfway up the hill, and the trailer broke in half.
Well, that's beyond the pale. At that point, you've got to decide this was not a project to be.
Well, that's what happened, Art.
Did you
We finished the job, and it was quite expensive. But
you finished the job?
Yes, sir.
How's life been?
Oh, well, it's been all right. Like I said, Art, I'd like to thank you for many, many, many years of outstanding radio programs.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
And
sir.
I'll miss you. Bye.
Take care. All right, now the rules are not to do that. Not tonight. It's just ghost to ghost. I appreciate the sentiments, but as I said, I'm not easy. I'm not good on goodbye, so I appreciate it. But only ghost stories this night. Only ghost stories. East of the Rockies, you're on the air. Hi.
Hello?
Hello.
Hi,
Yes.
this is Josie from Rhode Island.
Hi, Josie. How's Rhode Island this morning? Well, it's pretty late there, huh? Early, actually.
Yeah, it's almost 4:30.
Right.
I had the strangest occurrence happen to me about a week and a half ago.
Yes.
I was listening to your program, and I fell asleep on the couch. And then when I woke up, I realized your program was all through. So I got up, went to shut the radio off, and it was totally off.
You mean it wasn't on?
It wasn't on. The radio was completely off.
You mean you were hearing my show without the radio?
Well, I had fallen asleep, while I was listening to it.
Yes.
The radio was on. And then when I dozed off for a while, and then when I woke up, your program was already off.
And the radio was actually physically off.
It was physically off.
You didn't have a sleep timer on or anything?
Nothing. There's nothing. It doesn't have a sleep timer. It's just a regular radio. And I looked at it. I said, this is weird. I turned the on button. I put it on. It went on. And I shut it back off again. It was totally off. I just couldn't believe it. I looked at it and I was just staring at it, and I'm saying, what happened?
Well,
Go off.
when it's my program, you never know.
But you weren't on that night. It was that man that's going to take over. Was it Mike Siegel?
Mike Steele.
It was him that was on that night.
Same program.
Yeah, same program. But he was on that night. And I couldn't believe when I went to the radio, it was totally, I said, what in the world? I was just in shock. I said, who shut this off?
I don't know what to tell you.
I don't know. I can't, I don't understand it.
things in life we don't.
I know.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, goodbye.
You take care back there. West of the Rockies, you're on the air. Hello.
Yes. Hi.
Hi.
Hi, Mr. Bell. This is Cheryl in Sumner, Washington.
Welcome.
I have sort of an Amityville tale.
An Amityville tale?
Yes, sort of. About 15 years ago, my husband and Van and my two teenage daughters, we moved from California to Dodge City, Kansas, and my sister and her husband was already living there. And, of course, we needed a house, and she went out house hunting with me, and we found this really precious old two-story refurbished house.
Well, I'll tell you, Dodge City's kind of an eerie place.
Yes, it is. And I wish I had time to tell you all the eerie stories that happened to us there, but I'm only allowed one story. But I have some doozies. Anyway, so believe it or not, the house was on Elm Street. So, I mean, that should have told us something then, you know.
Yeah.
So, but it was just an adorable place. So we called the realtor, and he showed us the house. And my sister is psychic, by the way, and I mean, she astral travels out of her body and everything. But both of us had sort of a funny feeling when he showed us the house. But we didn't want to say anything to each other. We just kind of, we thought, well, maybe it means nothing, And the house was just adorable. They had completely refurbished it, and it was just darling. Anyway, so we went ahead and moved in, and it had the two bedrooms downstairs and a sunroom and the living room, dining room and kitchen, and then upstairs was a bedroom, like an office room, and another small bathroom. And we'd only been there about a week, and things just started happening, just Amityville type stuff.
Like what?
Oh God, we would wake up in the middle of the night and there'd be water running, and we'd go downstairs, and the kitchen sink, the water would be filling up in the sink, and our whole kitchen was flooded with water. There'd be black stuff in the downstairs toilet.
Black stuff?
Black stuff. My daughter in one of the bedrooms, she would tell me she didn't want to sleep in there anymore because there was a lady with a black dress that sat on the end of her bed, and she didn't want to be in
a black dress.
Like the old-fashioned black dresses, the long sleeves with the little lace collars, and like the old, like in the cowboy days.
Listen, I'll tell you what.
And now, more Ghost to Ghost AM.
Well, I surely do remember the Amityville house, and that house, by the way, I believe stands unoccupied today. You're back on the air again.
Yes, sir.
There was your long, cool woman in black dress.
I like that. I wish I had time to tell you all the amazing things, but I'm just going to try and touch on what I can.
Black in the toilet, that's bad.
Black in the toilet's bad, but it gets worse. I mean, like I said, there was this lady that always appeared in my one daughter's bedroom, and she never did anything. She just sat there on the bed, and then across the hall was my other daughter's bedroom, and he was one that liked a little bit of light on in the hallway. And she'd wake up in the middle of the night, and her door was shut, and she couldn't get out her door, and she'd bang on her door screaming. And my husband and I slept upstairs, so I'd have to come down and try to get her door open. Finally, we started stacking bricks and books and stuff in front of her door so it wouldn't close at night. But still, those would be moved, and her door would shut. Okay, I would take a bath downstairs. Someone would come behind me and start whispering to me. Upstairs in the bedroom, in the middle of the night, I'd wake up, and my husband's face would look like an old woman's face.
Oh, no.
In the upstairs bathroom, it was just like, it just had a shower and a sink and a toilet. And in the middle of the night, we'd wake up, and there'd be water squirting out of the sink like a waterfall, and there'd be water in the hallway. Let me think. Our washer and dryer was down in the basement. So my daughters and I, we'd go into the basement and do the laundry, and the door would shut and lock us in there. And obviously we stopped doing any of that at nighttime because the lights started going off at night, and then we'd be locked in the basement with the lights off. Then we tried burning candles, and then so we didn't do any laundry. at night anymore. And
what'd you do with this house?
oh well, we only lived there about, I don't know, 3 or 4 months maybe. My daughters and my sister's children, they went to the Catholic school around the corner. There was a Catholic church there. And finally it started getting really bad. Just horrible things kept happening. My husband was a trucker, and he'd leave like at 2 or 3 in the morning. And I would start hearing someone walking up and down the stairs, coming up down the stairs. Finally, I would have him wake me up, and he'd take me downstairs, and I'd sleep in the sunroom because it was the only, what I called the clean room, that was the safest room. My daughters started spending the night at their friends a lot. There would be a form that would be, now this house had all new everything in it, new carpet and everything, and there'd be this form that looked like a person laying in a fetal position, and there'd be a black stain on the carpet, and then it would go away. Finally, my sister and I couldn't take it anymore, so we went to the Hall of Records, and we checked out the house, and we found out that the lady had bought the house, and she refurbished it. I won't give any names here, of course. That wouldn't be right.
Thank you.
And she had bought the house from, it was the estate of the people that sold the house of the old woman that lived there. And her husband had died in the house, and the son, I guess the son had been found on the living room floor in that position. The husband had something wrong with his leg, and he walked funny, so I guess that's the sound we'd hear on the stairs. And the old woman, she went to the Catholic church, and she finally stopped going, and they came over to check on her, and she had become, she wouldn't even leave the house, and they finally had to drag her out of there and put her in a home, and she kept screaming and saying that no, she would die in her house, and she didn't want to leave it. Well, they would put her in a posy, at the old folks' home, and she'd get out of that, and she was always trying to escape. Anyway, she finally passed away. So anyway, when we checked the records, what we came up with, we felt like there was some sort of an evil in the house, but the old woman was somehow, I don't know, either the force or whatever it was pulled her there, and her soul couldn't go to the light, and so she was like earthbound in the house. So then we went and got the priest over at the church, and he came to bless the house.
Well, this really is Amityville.
Do I still have time?
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay. So we had 2 cats and 2 dogs. They would go upstairs. So the priest came. He came in the house. He went upstairs. He started sweating real bad. He started becoming real ill. He said, and so he blessed the house good because he said he had to leave. Anyway, he had to serve Mass later that afternoon, and he fainted at Mass, and became real ill for about 2 or 3 weeks. And then when we go to Mass, he wouldn't talk to us. And so finally, we started blessing the house ourselves, and I believe that we finally sent the old woman to the light, and her grave settled. We had heard that when there's still a mound over the grave and it hasn't settled, that means the spirit is around. We don't know if that's true or not, but anyway, the grave settled because we found her grave. And there was a baby that would cry, and it was just...
Believe me, I've got this picture graphically. Thank you very much.
You're welcome, sir.
And good night to you. Oh, my. Oh, my. Hey, Art. Since this is your last Coast to Coast on Coast to Coast, I thought I'd relate an interesting event that occurred several years ago. My friend's cousin lived in an old house in Trenton, New Jersey, that had been moved from Bordentown, New Jersey. It was previously used by Napoleon and his brother on visits to the area. Now, the story is not about Napoleon or his brother, but rather concerns the occupants of that house at around the same time. See, my friend's cousin had decided to remodel the house and appropriate the attic as a bedroom for their daughter. As her husband began the remodel, a series of peculiar incidents also began. Sure sounding familiar. They included bedroom drawers being emptied and contents strewn about, cold spots in the home, and her husband being pushed down the attic steps. As we are particularly sensitive to ghostly activities, she called us to please come over and see if we could determine what or who could be causing these frightening actions. Arriving at her home, we proceeded to the attic, where I saw a young girl about 14 or 15 curled up in a corner. She seemed very distraught. During our dialogue, I asked her what was upsetting her, and she replied, "I lost my ring. It's very special to me. And what is going to happen to me," she said. "He's giving my room to someone else." I assured her there was a better place for her, and before she was led to the light, I asked her name. "Sarah Cunningham," she replied. I related what Sarah had told me to my friend's cousin, who immediately turned a ghastly white and quickly left the room to retrieve something from her kitchen. "I found this morning," she said. I don't know where it came from or who it belongs to, and handed me a beautiful aspen ring about size 5 that she found in the kitchen faucets. I examined the ring and inside found the initials S.C. Note, the house was also part of the tunnels that Napoleon had constructed to aid his escape in the event it was needed. An interesting article on the house ran in either the Trenton Times or the Trentonian at the time the house was moved from Bordentown to its present location. I have a photocopy of the article, but it's very poor and not scannable. Cheerio, Barb in Pennsylvania. Thanks, Barb. First time caller line, you're on here, huh?
Hey, Art, this is Travis Hill.
Hi, Travis.
Calling to, I'm a ride mechanic at a local amusement park down here in Southern Cal, and I just want to tell you a ghost story about one of our rides.
Fire away.
Some years ago, there was one of the mechanics that worked there. I guess it was just like a pet ride, and consequently, he had died, not at the park, but he suffered a heart attack at his home.
What kind of ride was it?
It's a big wooden roller coaster.
Right, okay. Oh, yes, I remember those.
So, one of our electricians, I guess it must have been about a year later, was walking out to check the track at night, and he was checking proximity switches. I'm sure you're familiar with what those are.
Sure.
He's checking the proximity switches down in between the tracks, and he looked up, and here comes the guy who had died. Said that he checked all the switches at the trims, and you're good to go.
Really?
Yeah, and then I guess the electrician ran, and nobody's ever seen him physically, but there's been a few of us who have seen like the glow of a cigarette out on the track area, and he was very well known for chain smoking.
Good to go, huh?
Oh yeah, he said he's checking out his ride still.
I hear you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Take care, and there you have it again. Same theme. Again and again. People that seem bound to earth. God, the question, is it their soul? Is it their consciousness? Is it really them? Sure would seem so. And again, I know that in our own minds, we make it right by thinking that time is different on the other side, and that you can be in two places at one time, but maybe you can't. It's got to be at least an equal possibility, and it's pretty sobering to consider. Wildcard line, you're on the air. Hello.
How do you do?
I do okay.
Wonderful. This happened back when I had first gotten married back in 1976 to my first wife. And we had gotten up and routinely, my turn to make the coffee, I guess. So I had one of those, those old G percolators.
Sure. I have one of those.
You know how it is when you want to stand one of them things on end outside of itself, the basket and all that. And it's
You betcha.
practically difficult, okay?
Yep.
So, hence the story. I had gotten up, it was my turn to make it, et cetera, and I took the guts out and cleaned them and so forth, set them aside, all in the rack to dry, while I went and proceeded to clean the pot itself. So Well, I got the pot cleaned out and rinsed out, and I put it in the cold water, and I grabbed the coffee, and I went over to, pick up the basket and stem and so forth, and they were gone.
Gone.
And right, they were no longer in the, the drainer basket.
Yes.
So I looked around, I looked at the table, I couldn't find them. I called my wife, she came in, and I told her what had happened. She's like, well, where'd you set it? In the drainer. She looked there, it's not there. She looked at the table. We proceeded to go through the whole house to find this thing. And we went back in the kitchen, and on the windowsill, standing, assembled, and ready to go in the pot minus the coffee.
Oh, no.
Yes, there it was. Bright, shiny, sparkling, clean, and balancing perfectly on a painted, a rough painted windowsill. Oh, yeah, and this is one of those old houses in Chicago that was built back behind the local bar.
Yeah.
Okay, and there have been stories about that place before we even moved in, but, everything was pretty much benign up to that point. But we spent a good half hour looking for them guts. Finally, we came back in, and after like the third or fourth time, we looked around, and there it was sitting, gleaming in the sunlight, assembled and standing on end.
Well, it was a good act, but still in all, I don't know if I'd want to stick around.
Yeah, well, we didn't much after that. But
Anything else like that ever happen?
Well, when I was much younger, living in my folks' house, I had been, we had just moved in about a year, and I was laying in bed one Saturday morning, and everybody was in the front room, and all of a sudden, I hear clank, clankety clank, clankety clank, going across over my head. Okay.
Over your head?
Over my head, in the attic. Nobody lives in the attic, Art. Nothing's in the attic except a couple of old boxes, but here it sounds like somebody's dragging a 20-pound chain.
Nothing human.
No. Whatever it was, it had to weigh a ton because of the way it was walking. And I went up there and looked, and of course, nothing. But this was early on a Saturday morning.
Well, I don't know what to tell you, sir. I would just be very careful in life, that's all.
Yeah.
You take care.
You too.
Right. No, clunking with nobody living up there. And then the coffee maker. Well, maybe there is no linear time on the other side, and maybe that thing was just on the way to get coffee. East of the Rockies, you're on the air. Hello.
Hi, this is India calling from Wisconsin.
How you doing?
Pretty okay. How about you?
All right.
Okay, well, I have to say first of all that my family, the women in my family have all had, they're the ones that have like the metaphysical experiences and such.
Yes.
And so I guess I inherited that. So when I was about 13 or so, and I wasn't supposed to be out at night, but I was anyway. I was living over at a friend's house. I went down to, there's this park in town, by an old, by a lake, and it's surrounded, it's beautiful. It's surrounded by all these old mansions because where we live is like the biggest paper producing place in the world.
Yes.
So all the paper barons built their giant mansions over there.
Right.
And it's serene down there. Probably the prettiest place I've ever been, but we went down there and, it's at night it's a pretty creepy place to be. And, all of a sudden, I was talking to my friend, there's a giant fountain there, and we were sitting by the fountain. My friend says, look over there, do you see that? And I said, what? And she says, it looks like a horse. And of course, there's no horses in the park. So I turned to look, and about that time, whatever it was, seemed to change into a lot of people that shouldn't have been at the park at that time.
A lot of people?
Yeah, a lot of people, like 25 people walking straight towards us. And that about...
Did you originally... Wait a minute, hold it. Did you originally see this thing as a horse or a form or an animal?
Well, I looked over and I saw something and I thought, what is that?
And it morphed into 13 people or so or more?
Yeah, and they were walking towards us, but you couldn't see all of them. Some of them were shadows. But some of them you could see. Oh, this isn't the good part. I see this one guy, and he's staring just at me. And so I think, oh my God. So we run home and we don't tell anyone. But that's not the end of the story. I mean, I've had, like I said, the women in my family have experiences like this. So I'd see, I saw ghosts and I'd see all sorts of things. But I saw, one night I was up listening to you when I should have been in bed, and I was making a sandwich and in my kitchen, and we live in an old house, must be 150 years old maybe.
Right.
And I see out of the corner of my eye this, this tall man, the same man I saw in the park, walking towards me. And that about scared me to death. So I stepped back, and then he was gone. So I just, thought, I'll make the sandwich, eat the sandwich, and just forget about it. But, it never occurred to me, why one ghost would be picking on me, right? So it was about a year later that I found out that I'm descended from, like, a line of Amish settlers that originally came over in the early 1700s. And what had always struck me about this man that I'd seen was the way he was dressed. I always thought he's dressed like someone in the 1800s. I don't know why, but then it struck me that he was dressed like an Amish person. And I had recently, in the last year, become interested in those things like pagan topics and Wicca and stuff.
So it all hit you at once, really?
Yeah, because my family had gone back. They weren't Amish because they had strayed away from the faith and they'd become Methodists. But all the generations had been really religious. And I guess, I don't know, I am sure another generation might have strayed away, but I had just started, I wasn't a Christian.
I've got you. Listen, Ann, I've got to run, but beautiful story, thank you.
Okay, bye.
13-year-old girls, boy, I'll tell you. They cause a lot of trouble, 13-year-old girls do. Frequently associated with paranormal occurrences. There's something about them. We'll be back.
Wanna take a ride? Call Art Bell from west of the Rockies at 1-800-618-8255. East of the Rockies at 1-800-825-5033. First-time callers may reach Art at area code 775-727-1222. Or call the Wild Card line at 775-727-1295. To talk with Art on the toll-free international line, call your AT&T operator and have them dial 800-893-0903. This is Coast to Coast AM with Art Bell.
Isn't it funny? Even in the last couple of days, I find yet another piece of bumper music to add to that which all seems to fit. Ain't it so? Well, here's one for the books. It comes from Nan, that's N-A-N, Nan, in San Francisco. Art, I tried to get pregnant with my daughter for 2.5 years. During that time, I became aware of a presence. Presence that followed me around at all times of the day and night. A small shadow would pass by me, a wisp past my cheek. The shadow did not touch the floor. It was small and was in the air, always at the same height, about 4 feet in the air. Not only was I aware of the presence, I was aware of its personality. Listen closely now. After a period of time, the consistency of its presence and its response to me led me to believe that it was female, my daughter, and stubborn. At one point I remember asking out loud, "When are you going to show up?" The response was, as I thought in my mind, "When the time is right for me." Well, the upshot is that after 2.5 years of trying, I'd taken fertility drugs for 6 months and still wasn't pregnant. The entity was around almost all the time now. One day my close friend and neighbor told me that she had a dream that I was pregnant. My husband and I met with a doctor to begin moving more aggressive fertility drugs into me. And I'd just about given up on just getting pregnant. As soon as I let go, bingo! The personality essence that I had experienced around me was inside me. I knew not only that I was pregnant with a girl, which was proven by amniocentesis, but I knew who she was. The other day, I was having a conversation with this 5.5-year-old that I knew well when she was born. And she began talking about heaven. Since we're agnostic, and I don't believe in traditional religious concepts of heaven and hell, I have not discussed this with her, and I asked her where heaven was, and she pointed up. I asked her how she knew about it, and she told me that it was where she waited while she was waiting to come into my body. She told me that she used to visit me before she was born, and that she didn't want to come right away when I wanted her to. She has at other times repeatedly told me that she chose to be with me, and that she has a strangely comforting ability about her, as though she's mothering me. I had a son before her, and nothing like this happened with him. Very unusual. That's Nan, San Francisco. Unusual, Nan? Yeah, I'll say. First time caller line, you're on the air.
Hi, Art.
Hello.
It's Ro from Midland, Texas.
How you doing?
I'm doing very well this morning. How about you?
All right.
I've recently moved to Midland from Austin. I lived in Austin for 30 years. I was a college professor and graphic designer, and I was head of department at a local institute of higher education there. This is in the late 80s. I had been going through a really bad patch in my life. My dog had died. I had lost 7 relatives, including my father.
It seems like it all comes at once, doesn't it?
It does. It comes and when it hits the fan, it just spreads out in tandem.
Yep.
And my best friend had just stabbed me in the back, and we were going through political assassinations at the college, and I had just been demoted that day and put on double secret probation for something I hadn't done. And by the time I got home from work, I was feeling pretty bad.
Life stinks.
So I went in and took a long hot bubble bath and came out, sitting on the side of the bed, winding my clock, setting my alarm. And I was going, my father had been a World War II veteran and in really bad fighting, and an aerospace engineer, and worked on the Apollo moonshot.
Oh,
and
really?
Gone into the oil business, and he was a pretty tough old bird, and he'd been ill for a long time, dead on the arrival at the hospital 5 times, and revived out of it,
Wow.
miraculously. And he had finally passed on a month before. And so I was sitting there. He was a very wise and good man. And I was just thinking to myself, I was going, boy, Pop, I could really use your help right now. I really need you. And I suddenly felt this presence behind me on the other side of the bed, and this weight go down on the bed.
Wow.
And I lived by myself with my dog before he died, so the hair went up on the back of my neck. And I turned around, and there was my dad, just 3D, and as solid as he could possibly be, sitting there on the side of the bed looking at me.
The hair's going up on the back of my neck.
And he had this real stern look on his face, and I thought, oh my God, he knows every bad thing I've ever done in my life now. And so I said, is Dad when he was upset with you, and his eyelids would flutter and his eyes would roll in the back of his head, and all you could see were the whites of his eyes. And he started doing that, like, you idiot, can't you see me sitting here? And so I went across the bed, and I wrapped my arms around him, and he wrapped his arms around me, and he just hugged me very tight. And I was with him like that for about 30 minutes. He never said a word. I never said another word. I went to sleep with my head on my father's chest. And when I woke up the next morning, he was gone. And I had been tucked into bed. And here I was, like 38 years old. I had been tucked into bed, and the covers had been pulled over me where the covers hadn't even been turned down.
Wow. I don't even know what to say to that.
I would say that's pretty fine.
Yeah, pretty fine. And better than some of the rest I've been hearing this morning in terms of what seems to happen to us.
Well, you know, it depends upon where your consciousness is. If you're afraid of, I've been one of those kids that when I came through, I never lost that ability to see things. And you name it, just about everything that's been on your show, I have experienced in a long time.
Well, that's a lot, but that one, we're going to have a hard time beating that. Thank you, dear.
You have a good one.
Take care. Oh, brother. Feel the bed depress, and you turn around, and there's your father. In full physical form. Fall asleep with you. Dear Art, here's a ghost story from when I was a little girl. This comes from a Chinese camp. It says a Chinese camp. When I was 7 years old, I went to stay overnight with my aunt in her small house in Chinese Camp, California. Okay, Chinese Camp, California. The town is where all of the Chinese miners were sequestered during the gold rush near Table Mountain. I'd never been there before, and as I was young, I didn't really know about the history of the house. According to my aunt, the guest bedroom was very haunted. On one occasion, a guest of hers woke crying uncontrollably in the room. When my aunt asked her what was the matter, she replied she couldn't sleep because there was a woman standing over her and wouldn't go away. My aunt saw nothing. This was the room I was to sleep in. After tucking me into bed, my aunt and uncle retired to their bedroom to sleep. Later in the night, I awoke in the room feeling somewhat uneasy. Suddenly, without warning, I was shoved very roughly from the bed onto the floor. I was startled and disoriented. I headed toward the area where I thought the door would be, but I couldn't find it. I became even more frightened as I couldn't find the way out and didn't want to look back at what had shoved me out of bed. Don't blame me a bit. I became so scared that I started crying and threw myself against the wall. My aunt heard my cries and found me, a scared, crumpled little girl, trying to claw through the wall. Needless to say, I slept in her bed for the rest of that night. It was not until I was older that I learned the original owner of the house, an unhappy old woman, had hung herself in the attic. The steps to the attic had been walled off. Naturally, the guest bedroom was where the door to the attic used to be. That's Amy S. in Santa Cruz. Wildcard Line, you're on the air.
Hi, Eric. This is Trevor from Saskatoon.
How you doing?
I'm in the Haunted Hotel.
The Haunted Hotel.
Haunted Hotel. This thing is the building's about it was built in the 1900s when this city was just a town at the time. It took probably like 10 minutes to cross, but it was one of the best ones at the time.
What kind of haunting?
You name it. I got thumps, I've had, I'll give you an example of the history of the place first. It'd be the best way to describe it. Going about from the 40s all the way to almost present day, except for about 6 years ago when the company that I work with took over the place. This building sat like dead for 5 years. But area, like huge pool areas, also big water slide. That used to be a double-layer bar. And that place had hippies, bikers, natives, every class. So you can just imagine the fights. I guess the police used to keep the paddy wagon back there, toss the drunks and those who were fighting into the back, drive it over to the police station and come back.
Sure.
It was one of the roughest ones in the province. And, well, anyway, to this day, like, you'd be walking through the pool area or into our, what is now a TV area, or where an old lounge used to be.
Yes.
And you can hear music. You can hear, like, a giant party.
How do you feel about living in a place like that?
I work here.
Or working in a place like that?
I don't mind it. It's actually not too bad, considering some of the other stuff that goes on here. Like, you go through every once in a while, you hear music, and the TV's off, there's no radios on, and it's just, all of a sudden, you just cock your head a bit, and you can hear it real faint. And you try and find it, you'll never find it. People have come in, and, where's the bar? There's no bar. There is, though, I can hear the music. There is no music, bud, and this is when I only had 3 people living here at the time.
Do you tell them what it is?
Every once in a while, depending on who they are, if they're really phlegm, then I tell them, oh, it's just a ghost, and they're, oh, yeah, sure, and they leave. But I told one person once, my boss got mad at me.
Yeah, I can understand that.
Yeah, but this is where it gets really weird. Downstairs used to be an old pool hall, and that's where the security guards would go down there, and we'd have our smoke break. My one partner, he never believed me. He'd seen the elevator, it goes up to the 4th floor and comes down, and the doors open up by themselves and close. Open and close. And sit there, they open and close maybe 2-3 times an hour. And it's still on the main floor, and there's no...
I heard a story just like that earlier.
And it gets better. So, then my partner, Ken, goes down the stairs, and he's having his cigarette, and he never believes me. Well, he's sitting there, and he's just having his cigarette and his coffee, and all of a sudden he feels this hand reach out and grab him on the shoulder and start and squeeze it, like, good job. Ken jumps, turns around, pulls out his Maglite flashlight, and is ready to swing, and there's no one there. Now Ken's starting to believe me because he feels it again on the other shoulder. Whips around and the wall. And just is there, I'm just finishing my smoke and I'm going to get out of here. And he finishes his cigarette and runs upstairs and he tells me. Oh, I start laughing at him, and the next night.
I wouldn't have to be told twice that way.
Oh, yeah. They're actually quite, the ones that we got are all nice ghosts. Like, there's one in the kitchen. You go down there about, actually around 3 o'clock in the morning to about 4 o'clock in the morning. You can smell fresh baked bread. The kitchen doesn't make that anymore. They haven't made it for a long time, and you can smell it. And fresh brewed coffee, and the cafe has been closed it closed at 7.
Well, all right, so what do you think that says about the nature of our souls and what happens to us when we physically die? I mean, what does that say?
I think what it is a psychic impression of the place. Except for maybe a couple of them who just don't realize they're dead. Like, or they've done something so awful they're forced to repeat it over and over and over again. Like upstairs on the roof, we found that there was in the 20s and 30s, a couple people who took a couple headers off the roof and killed themselves. We were up there watching a concert one night, and we were looking down, and I got great balance art. And I was sitting there, and I'm crouched down, and I'm looking at this, and I'm watching this concert, and next thing I know, all of a sudden, I'm falling off I'm being pushed. I'm reeling, and I call my partner over, and he comes running over, and all of a sudden I get pulled backwards, and Ken's still about 10, 15 feet away from me.
That was,
And this is 4.5 stories up, and I was on literally almost on all fours when I got pushed. So, there's no way I accidentally tripped or anything. I wasn't moving, I was solidly planted.
Well, you must really like your job. That's
I do. I've been here for 3 years. The one in the cafe, I asked her what her name was one day, just on a Ouija board, and she spelled it out for me. I couldn't pronounce it, and she got mad at me, and the vacuum cleaner quit working for 3 days. Works in every other room except for the vacuum cleaner, except for the cafe.
Yeah.
So I just call her G from now on. And I said, if you want me to call you anything, I'll just call you G, and that's it, because
the Select Committee to investigate the January 6th attack on the United States Capitol will be in order. Without objection, the chair is authorized to declare the committee in recess at any point. Pursuant to House Deposition Authority Regulation 10, the chair announces the committee's approval to release the deposition material presented during today's hearing. Good morning. Last week, the Select Committee laid out a preview of our initial findings about the conspiracy overseen and directed by Donald Trump to overturn the results of the 2020 presidential election and block the transfer of power, a scheme unprecedented in American history. My colleagues and I don't want to spend time talking about ourselves during these hearings, but as someone who's run for office a few times, I can tell you at the end of a campaign, it all comes down to the numbers. The numbers tell you the winner and the loser. For the most part, the numbers don't lie. But if something doesn't add up with the numbers, you go to court to get resolution. And that's the end of the line. We accept those results. That's what it means to respect the rule of law. That's what it means to seek elective office in our democracy. Because those numbers aren't just numbers, they're votes. They're your votes. They are the will and the voice of the people. And the very least we should expect from any person seeking a position of public trust is the acceptance of the will of the people, win or lose. Donald Trump didn't. He didn't have the numbers. He went to court. He still didn't have the numbers. He lost. But he betrayed the trust of the American people. He ignored the will of the voters. He lied to his supporters and the country. And he tried to remain in office after the people had voted him out. And the courts upheld the will of the people. This morning, we'll tell the story of how Donald Trump lost an election and knew he lost an election, and as a result of his loss, decided to wage an attack on our democracy, an attack on the American people by trying to rob you of your voice in our democracy, and in doing so, lit the fuse that led to the horrific violence of January 6th, when a mob of his supporters stormed the Capitol sent by Donald Trump to stop the transfer of power. Today, my colleague from California, Ms. Lofgren, and our witnesses will detail the Select Committee's findings on these matters. But first, I will recognize our distinguished Vice Chair, Ms. Cheney of Wyoming, for any opening statement she'd care to offer.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Last week, as the Chairman noted, our committee began outlining a 7-part plan overseen by President Trump to overturn the 2020 election. Today, we will begin looking at the initial part of that plan.
Sorry about that, ladies and gentlemen. I did not expect the stupid 2020 campaign to be part of tonight's broadcast. But with that, we will bring this episode to a close. Please make sure you do like, share, and subscribe. Help us get to the goal of 50,000 views, 1,000 subscribers. So box you over next year sends those nice red packages, and Google puts us on the algorithms. So until next time, like, share, and subscribe become the one another and release the Krakens. We march along this overnight and every overnight. Here from day one. Have a great night's sleep. We'll see you all tomorrow.